Oh man, history, am I right? Okay, bye. Arcades are awesome. They were once a huge part of our lives and are an even bigger and critical part of video game history. Their popularity at the time was like no other and was definitely far from being matched. And that's where history kicks in. Herbert Hoover is in office and gambling was in. Isn't that cool? However, the problem with gambling is, it isn't exactly for everybody. As you know, gambling is a game of chance, and you're basically spending money on something where the odds are most likely not in your favor for a cash prize. So in 1931, a game known as Baffleball hit the scene. It's in the category of pinball machine, which is weird because get this, no bumpers. The concept of Baffleball is as follows. You pay 1 cent for 10, or sometimes 7, balls to shoot and score as many points as possible. This sounds fun and all, except it wasn't seen as the game of skill it was trying to be. It was still sorta gambling in disguise. But this was the start of something big. After many years of ideas and design, it all came down to one style of game known as pinball. The coin-op business was forever changed. Pinball was a hit. Now designed to appeal to all ages and actually planned to provide a challenge that required the player's skill, pinball was not seen as a gamble, but it was seen as fun for everybody. Of course, this wasn't always the case, however. Pinball suffered the same fate as Baffleball for a handful of years, being seen as a slot machine that robbed kids of their hard-earned cash. But when this ban was lifted, oh boy did the manufacturers roll out the pinball machines. The success of the pinball machine was like no other. Yeah, World War II was going on at the time, but did you see Billy's new high score? Beat that, Hitler. Pinball's success lasted forever, but it did not stop slowing down until a new type of game started to make an appearance. One of my most favorite things about pinball machines was the widespread appeal. Not only were they easy to play, but something that is often overlooked was their style. They were bright, loud, and brilliantly designed pieces of machinery, and they came in every form imaginable. Chances are, if you like it, there's a pinball machine for it. I'm not even joking, there's one for absolutely everything. Granted, they all look identical and play pretty much the exact same. The style is what drags you in and calls for more. I mean, you've got Star Wars, Kiss, Batman, the Beatles, Super Mario... Who? Like I said before, pinball was kept the exact same, just with a different skin. Now, this isn't the game's fault because there's only so much you can do with the metal ball and some bumpers. Having said that, with technology increasing at an astonishing rate and people wanting to experiment further in that field, it took the brainpower of engineer Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney to develop the first commercially sold arcade game known as Computer Space. A simple game where all you do is take control of a rocket ship and fend off against 2 saucers. It may not have been much, but it was without a doubt revolutionary. But let's be real, look at this thing. It doesn't look like an arcade game, it looks like something science fiction movies tell you to stay far away from. With the newly found success of Computer Space, well, what do you do with all of it? Well, milk it for what it's worth, of course. In November of 1972, a whole year after the release of Computer Space, the video game company Atari, led by Bushnell and Dabney, did it yet again. The widely popular and commercial success of Pong made it all the rage, and was Atari's breakout. But seriously, it's Pong. Do I really need to say more? It found its way into homes in too many different forms. Even Nintendo gave it a shot with Color TV Game 15, which is just Pong, 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 Pong. Throughout the 1970s, it seemed as if Atari was untouchable, bringing out hit after hit. Even other game companies came close, with Taito releasing the cult classic Space Invaders. But Atari answered back in the form of 1979's Asteroids, selling over 70,000 cabinets, being Atari's highest selling game and quite possibly the highest selling game of all time until... As Atari was too busy being bigger than life itself, a little company known as Namco was keeping a low pro, so little did anybody know that they would release the most popular arcade game of all time, PAC-MAN. If people were already into the arcade craze, then Pac-Man definitely made them want to stay. Unfortunately, I think this is where arcade gaming hit its peak. There were so many games coming out that it was a bit overwhelming. Remember Nintendo from a while back? Well, after their arcade game Radar Scope was a failure, they took a second chance on it and took everything that didn't sell and turned it into a little game known as Popeye. Just kidding, they didn't get the rights to those characters and made Donkey Kong instead. It was well received by players, which only encouraged Nintendo to do more with video games, and that turned out pretty well for them, didn't it? During the life of arcades, the same companies making those games were also working on home consoles for consumers to enjoy those games from the comfort of their own home. However, in 1983, the market was oversaturated with these consoles, and certain games did not help at all. They were only feeding the fire. Video games were at an all-time low until Nintendo released the Nintendo Entertainment System, a new home console that was giving a lot of quality titles, and it definitely did save the video game crash. But those titles were also exclusive to the system and weren't found in the arcades. The only edge arcades had over home consoles at the time was sheer power. Games on the NES simply couldn't compete in that aspect. As technology only continued to get more advanced by the day, and with the NES basically saving video games, things were looking great. Arcades were still being visited, but only more so once the release of two titans gave an all-new meaning to the word competition. Midway's Mortal Kombat and Capcom's Street Fighter 2. Yeah, Street Fighter 1 was a thing, but we don't talk about that. Of the two, Street Fighter hit the scene first in February of 1991. It's a great fighting game that is still often played competitively to this day. 1 year later, on August 1992, ESRB The Game was launched and gave notable realistic graphics, as realistic as you could make a game look in 1992. But Mortal Kombat in particular was something special. It showed off what could be done visually and what could actually be seen in a video game. However, even though these games were eating everybody's quarters at the arcade, within a year of each game's release, they both got physical releases on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, which kind of made the arcade games seem like they weren't needed anymore. Why would I want to go to an arcade when I have both of these games at home and could play them anytime I want? Which brings us to the mid-90s. Tickle Me Elmo is the hottest new toy. This has nothing to do with anything, but that's pretty cool. Something that's also pretty cool is how console games have made the jump from 2D to 3D, and we're now way more story-driven and elaborate rather than being a novelty that you pay a quarter for. The Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 were also at the top, possibly being the beginning of the end for arcade gaming. And what do you know? It was the end, with the majority of arcade games being nothing but fighters and 1999 bringing Dance Dance Revolution. The only thing keeping arcades alive at this point were racing games and on-rail shooters. Fun things to play, no doubt, but it didn't attract nearly as many people as in the past. Especially with arcades being hidden in the form of Chuck E. Cheese's and other various pizza chains. Going to an arcade seemed like going to a place for kids in elementary school, not a place for everybody. And that's pretty much it. Consoles quickly took over and we were sitting at home playing these games instead of being with our friends and socializing, spending our hard-earned cash for 10 minutes of excitement. So if you don't mind me, I'm going to go and spend my hard-earned cash for 10 minutes of excitement. I will be right back. I can hear all of the colors of the rainbow.